Imagine a man alone and starving deep within a jungle cave. For 2 grueling years after the war officially ended, he survived on the raw, desperate instincts of a cornered animal. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound sent his heart pounding with terror. He was certain his end was near, and he was prepared to meet it with a rusted bayonet. This is the incredible and deeply moving true story of Private First Class Shoichi Yokoi. On March 15, 1947, Private First Class Shoichi Yokoi hunched within the hidden bamboo grotto he had meticulously carved into the lush jungle hillside of Guam. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he honed a rusty bayonet against a rough stone. Outside, foreign voices, unmistakably American, drifted ominously through the thick, humid air. They were perilously close, far too close. For 2 agonizing years since Japan's official surrender, Yokoi had subsisted on whatever the jungle offered: frogs, scavenging rats, slimy snails, and wild bitter nuts. His uniform, once a symbol of pride, had long since disintegrated, replaced by rough bark cloth he had painstakingly woven himself. At 31 years old, he appeared a man of 60, gaunt, hollow, eyed his teeth loose from chronic malnutrition. But it wasn't the gnawing hunger that caused his heart to race now. It was the chilling certainty of the fate awaiting him if the Americans discovered his sanctuary. He vividly recalled the disturbing propaganda leaflets his commanding officer had distributed back in 1944. They depicted grim images: Japanese soldiers with their eyes brutally removed, their bodies dismembered, men subjected to agonizing interrogation before execution. "This is precisely what the American monsters do to prisoners," Lieutenant Idu had sternly warned. "Uphold honor unto death. Never ever capitulate." Yokoi had internalized every terrifying syllable. He'd also overheard other chilling tales whispered furtively among his comrades during the hushed hours of darkness. Stories of Americans compelling captives to excavate their own burial plots, of officers hoarding Japanese skulls as grisly mementos. The pervasive rumors painted American Marines as savage brutes devoid of compassion, who viewed Japanese soldiers as mere pests to be eradicated without a second thought. Now, after concealing himself in that jungle cave for 731 desperate days, surviving on meager insects and brackish jungle water, those distant voices signaled that his desperate solitude had reached its grim conclusion. Yokoi slowly pressed the cold steel of the bayonet against his own abdomen, probing the sharp tip. Should his capture prove unavoidable, perhaps it was preferable to take his own life. To depart this world with the dignity expected of a true Japanese warrior. The voices intensified, punctuated by loud, mocking American laughter. They were stalking him like prey. Yokoi's eyes snapped, shut his grip on the bayonet, tightening even more firmly, and he muttered a last heartfelt plea to his mother, far away in Aichi Prefecture. He knew with unwavering clarity that he would never see her again. This much he was certain of. However, what unfolded next would irrevocably alter his perception of the American enemy. The cave's entrance burst open, blinding him with a torrent of sunlight. "Good heavens, someone's in here," he heard a voice exclaim. Yokoi's eyes, struggling to adapt after 2 years of perpetual gloom, stung painfully from the unexpected glare. He lifted his bayonet, his limbs shaking uncontrollably, but his starved physique failed him. The weapon fell from his bony grasp, clanking loudly on the stone floor. 2 American Marines stood silhouetted in the cave's opening. They were youthful soldiers, perhaps barely 20 years old, clad in blindingly pristine uniforms that seemed impossibly bright to Yokoi's light-sensitive eyes. Behind them, a Chamorro guide, accompanying the Marines, gestured emphatically while speaking a torrent of English. This is the end, Yokoi realized. His final moments had arrived. He attempted to rise, intending to meet his demise with a soldier's resolve, but his knees gave way. He slumped against the damp cave wall as his crudely fashioned bark garments disintegrated, revealing a skeletal frame with ribs protruding like withered bamboo stalks. He was stripped bare, emaciated, and utterly vulnerable. The taller Marine, whose name tape identified him as Patterson, slowly dropped his weapon. The other crews followed suit. "Good heavens," Patterson murmured softly. Imagine the terror that drove him to conceal himself in a hole for 2 whole years. Yokoi could not comprehend their English words, but he discerned only revulsion in their tone. His appearance clearly repulsed them. The brutal torment he expected was surely imminent. He shut his eyes tightly, bracing himself for the initial strike. Instead, he registered a gentle, soft cloth settle upon his shoulders. Yokoi's eyes snapped open in disbelief. Patterson had taken off his own uniform jacket and carefully draped it around Yokoi's gaunt frame. The fabric emanating warmth from Patterson's skin carried the distinct civilized aromas of soap and tobacco smells that had nearly vanished from his memory. "Take it easy, friend," Cruz offered, his voice soft and reassuring. "No harm will come to you." Yokoi could not grasp the specifics of their English words, but the intonation bewildered him. The expected torrent of animosity, the promised brutality, where was it? Cruz then produced a canteen from his utility belt and brought it gently to Yokoi's parched lips. Pure, refreshing water flowed into Yokoi's mouth. He had been subsisting on fetid jungle puddles for what felt like an eternity. This was a divine elixir. Slowly, Cruz cautioned, retracting the canteen as Yokoi attempted to drink too eagerly. "You'll upset your stomach." Patterson, meanwhile, radioed for immediate medical assistance. Yokoi discerned a single word, Japanese. This is it, he thought. They're summoning the tormentors, the inquisitors. This unexpected benevolence is merely a cruel deception. But then Cruz delved into his rucksack and produced a chocolate bar. He meticulously unwrapped it, then snapped off a segment, extending it towards Yokoi. Yokoi gazed blankly at the chocolate. His brain struggled to comprehend this bizarre turn of events. Hostile combatants weren't meant to offer sustenance. Their role was to bludgeon, to deprive, to utterly crush him. "Go on," Cruz urged, gesturing reassurance while miming eating. "It's safe." Yokoi's trembling hand tentatively took the chocolate. The rich sweetness burst across his palate, a sensation he hadn't known since departing Japan 3 long years prior. And then, without warning, tears inexplicably welled up and flowed down his gaunt cheeks. Patterson remained by his side, silent, a simple presence, offering a watchful, patient demeanor. "The poor soul," Patterson murmured softly to Cruz. Imagine the terror that drove him to conceal himself in a hole for 2 whole years. Yokoi sobbed not from physical agony, but from profound bewilderment. He had been taught these Americans were fiends. Why were they extending such fundamental decency to him? 20 minutes later, a Marine Corps medic identified as Doc Williams, an African-American corpsman from Georgia who had witnessed countless injuries, appeared. He promptly began his assessment. "This individual is gravely malnourished," Williams declared, carefully inspecting Yokoi's swollen limbs and patchy skin. "Likely beriberi and certainly infested with parasites. He requires immediate hospitalization." Yokoi could not grasp the specifics of the diagnosis, but he registered Williams' touch, as gentle and expert as the medic checked. His pulse shone a small flashlight into his eyes and gently palpated his swollen abdomen. Under Imperial Japanese Army protocols, medical attention was prioritized for officers, while enlisted men endured delays and enemy combatants received no care whatsoever. Yet an American medic dedicated 20 precious minutes to examining him, meticulously dressing the festering wounds on his feet and administering an injection that Yokoi would later identify as life-saving antibiotics. "You'll recover," Williams stated, his gaze steady as it met Yokoi's. "Do you comprehend?" "All right." Yokoi could not comprehend the words, but he grasped the meaning conveyed through their shared glance. There was no animosity or revulsion in Williams's eyes. Instead, an underlying current of something else, perhaps empathy, even a touch of sorrow. They gently bore Yokoi from the dense jungle on a makeshift stretcher. He braced himself to be tossed into a transport truck, perhaps enduring further abuse during the journey. Patterson, however, walked alongside the stretcher, a reassuring hand on Yokoi's shoulder, speaking in a measured, soothing tone. "You're probably thinking of your loved ones, aren't you?" Patterson offered. "Don't you fret, friend. We'll ensure they receive news. They'll know you're safe and sound." Upon arrival at the base hospital on Guam, Yokoi encountered revelations that completely demolished his previous understanding of the world. He was provided with a proper bed, not a cold cell floor nor a confining cage, but a soft bed adorned with fresh white linen. Yokoi recuperated in the hospital for 3 full weeks. His dedicated nurse was Lieutenant Mary Chen, a Chinese-American from San Francisco whose family had themselves escaped the brutal Japanese occupation in China. If ever there was a person with justification to despise Japanese soldiers, it was she. Yet her compassion towards him was steadfast and absolute. Each morning she brought him gentle rice porridge, slowly reintroducing solid foods to his diet. As his digestive system slowly adapted, she meticulously changed his dressings, administered his prescribed medications, and against all linguistic odds, conveyed to him a profound sense of security. "My grandmother resides in Shanghai," she confided to him one afternoon, even though he couldn't comprehend her words. "Your military committed horrendous acts there, but you are simply a terrified boy who was abandoned. I perceive that clearly." On his fourth day of recovery, an interpreter arrived, a Japanese-American sergeant named George Nakamura. His own family had been confined in internment camps back home, even as he valiantly served in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team in Europe. Private Yokoi Nakamura began in Japanese. "These Americans are asking if you wish to write a letter to your family. They want them to know you're alive." Yokoi gazed blankly, utterly convinced he had misunderstood. "My family," he whispered. "Indeed. Your mother, your brothers and sisters, anyone you choose. The Red Cross will ensure its delivery. But I am a captive." "Why would such a thing be permitted?" Yokoi asked. Nakamura offered a melancholic smile. "It is mandated by the Geneva Convention," he explained, "and furthermore, these Marines uphold the principle of humane treatment for all, even those considered adversaries." Yokoi's trembling hands clutched the pen as he composed his inaugural letter home. "Honorable Mother, I am alive and held in American custody on Guam. I bear the shame of not having perished in battle, yet the Americans have shown me unforeseen benevolence. I am receiving medical treatment and sustenance. I cannot fathom their reasons. Please forgive your unworthy son for my continued existence." 3 weeks thence, a reply arrived. His mother, whom he believed lost since 1945, was alive. Her tears were of pure joy. His perceived dishonor held no sway. She simply yearned for her son's return. Seated in his hospital bed, Yokoi read his mother's words, and an overwhelming emotional dam broke within him. Patterson, a frequent visitor, took a seat beside him. Wonderful news, he offered. With Nakamura's gentle translation, Yokoi managed to articulate, "My mother. She desires my return, even though I yielded myself." "Naturally she does," Patterson affirmed. "You are her flesh and blood. Conflict cannot alter that bond." During his recovery, Yokoi absorbed every detail with the keen analytical mind of a soldier honed for intelligence gathering. His observations starkly refuted 3 years of ingrained propaganda. American GIS played baseball as the day waned. They grumbled about the oppressive heat, the monotonous rations, and their superiors precisely as his own Japanese comrades once had. They shared snapshots of their sweethearts and spouses. They felt longing for home weariness and a fierce desire to return. They were unmistakably human beings. Doc Williams presented Yokoi with a Japanese-English dictionary and dedicated his off-duty hours to instructing him in fundamental English. "Master this," Williams urged through Nakamura. "It will aid you upon your return home. Japan and America will forge a bond of friendship after this conflict. You will witness it." Yokoi struggled to accept this notion. How could sworn adversaries possibly become allies? But then, Lieutenant Chen presented him with a newspaper. American assistance was already being funneled into Japan. Provisions of food, medical supplies, and building materials were arriving. General MacArthur was supervising a massive reconstruction effort, not a campaign of devastation. The emperor, far from being executed, had been permitted to retain his position, his authority curtailed, but his sovereign dignity upheld. "Your populace was led to believe we were malevolent entities," Nakamura elaborated. "Yet we are simply individuals striving to act justly. Occasionally we falter, but our effort remains constant." One quiet afternoon, a youthful Marine Private Tommy O'Brien of Boston paid Yokoi a visit. He was merely ***19***, with rosy cheeks appearing barely out of high school. "My father served in France during the previous war," O'Brien relayed through Nakamura. "He was taken prisoner by the Germans in 1918. He always said they treated him fairly. When this conflict erupted, he extracted a promise from me. If I ever captured an enemy, I was to remember they were someone's child just as I am." O'Brien produced a photograph of his family, his father, his mother, and ***3*** younger sisters. "That's my father," he indicated. He recounted that the German soldier who offered him water likely saved his life. "I thought perhaps I could offer that same humanity to another." Yokoi, in turn, presented O'Brien with the letter from his mother. Through Nakamura's translation, they found common ground, discussing their respective families, their childhood neighborhoods, and the comfort foods they longed for. For a precious ***20**** minutes, the barriers of enemy uniforms dissolved. They were simply ***2***, young men each yearning for the solace of home and their mothers. On a subsequent day, Patterson presented Yokoi with a radio. "Perhaps you'd enjoy some melodies," Patterson suggested gently. He carefully tuned it to a station broadcasting Japanese music, direct transmissions from Tokyo. Yokoi, who hadn't heard his native music in 3 agonizing years, wept once more. Patterson remained by his side, silent, a simple presence. The most astonishing revelation occurred with the arrival of Marine Captain Robert Henderson, who was there to formally interview Yokoi for official Army records. Henderson had endured some of the Pacific's most savage battles, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima. He had witnessed his own men fall to Japanese soldiers, giving him every conceivable reason for animosity. Yet he extended his hand to Yokoi. Private Yokoi Henderson stated through Nakamura, "There's something I want you to understand. I battled your army for 3 arduous years. I mourned lost comrades. But you persevered, by dwelling in a subterranean hideout, subsisting on rodents, convinced we would inflict death by torture. That requires a unique fortitude." Henderson paused, ensuring Nakamura's translation was precise. "You were a soldier, executing commands. As was I. The conflict has ended. Now we are simply men striving to reunite with our families. I honor that. I honor you." Yokoi was speechless. In the Imperial Japanese, army officers never extended their hands to enlisted personnel, and enemy officers certainly never conveyed respect. Henderson persisted. "When you return home, recount what you witnessed here. Inform your countrymen that Americans are not malevolent spirits. We are merely individuals who uphold the belief that every person merits inherent dignity, even our adversaries. That is the creed my nation instilled in me, and that is what I strive to embody." The humane treatment Yokoi received was no mere happenstance. It stemmed from a deliberate policy deeply embedded in American military doctrine and cultural principles. Dating back to the Revolutionary War, the American military had consistently adhered to the accepted rules of engagement concerning prisoners of war. By the time of World War II, the Geneva Convention of 1929 had established explicit guidelines ensuring sufficient sustenance, medical attention, housing, the right to communicate with family, and safeguarding against brutality and threats. Yet this went beyond mere adherence to regulations. American military leaders genuinely believed that the benevolent treatment of prisoners of war served crucial strategic objectives. General Eisenhower, who commanded the supreme Allied forces in Europe, had issued unequivocal directives. Prisoners of war were to be treated with utmost humanity and unwavering respect at all times. He reasoned that this approach would incentivize capitulation, thereby preserving American lives and advancing American interests in the post-war global landscape. Admiral Chester Nimitz of the Navy took this principle even further. He publicly declared that Japanese submarine crews who had deliberately targeted hospital ships and murdered helpless survivors in the water should nonetheless be afforded fair treatment as prisoners of war. "We are obligated to rise above the barbarity of our foes," Nimitz asserted, "for that is the true hallmark, distinguishing civilization from savagery." Naturally, this ideal was not always universally upheld. Regrettably, atrocities did transpire. Certain American soldiers, profoundly scarred by the horrors of combat and the brutal Japanese atrocities they witnessed, resorted to killing or savagely mistreating prisoners. The take-no-prisoners mindset while present, particularly in the initial stages of the Pacific War, was never official policy nor sanctioned doctrine. And whenever such transgressions came to light, they were met with disciplinary action. Patterson elucidated this point to Yokoi one evening. "Some of our men harbored deep resentment," he confessed through Nakamura. "They suffered losses from kamikaze, assaults from suicidal banzai charges. I comprehend their pain, but our commanding officers strictly forbid retaliation. They instruct us that we are to be superior to such impulses." Yokoi's diary, compiled from scraps of paper that Nakamura helped him write on, traces his psychological transformation throughout his recovery. "Day 5, still cannot believe they feed me 3 meals each day. The food is strange but adequate. No one has struck me. Day 9, Nurse Chen changed my bandages again. She is Chinese. We killed her people. Yet she tends my wounds as if I were her brother. I do not understand. Day 15, Patterson brought me cigarettes. American cigarettes. Very strong. We smoked together, and he showed me photos of his sweetheart in California. She looks kind. He says after the war he wants to open a restaurant. He asks what I want to do. I have no answer. I thought I would die in this war." Day 21, Mother's letter arrived. I wept like a child. Sergeant Nakamura stayed with me. He told me his own story. His family imprisoned in America while he fought for America. He says, "Hatred serves no one. Mercy is stronger than revenge." I am beginning to believe him. By his 3rd week, Yokoi's diary entries shifted from confusion to something else entirely. "These Americans confuse me deeply. They should hate us. We killed many of them, yet they treat me with kindness. I did not show Chinese prisoners such treatment when I was stationed in Manchuria. I am ashamed of what I did then. These Americans show me what honor truly looks like. Yokoi wasn't alone in his extraordinary experience. Of the approximately 41,000 Japanese servicemen who became American prisoners of war during World War II, the vast majority survived captivity, a stark contrast to the grim fate of Allied POWs in Japanese hands, where death rates approached 27%. American POW camps in Hawaii, California, and other locations provided adequate nutrition, medical care, recreational facilities, and even educational programs. Japanese prisoners were permitted to form work details for which they were paid. They received Red Cross packages, played sports, formed musical groups, and even published camp newspapers. German and Italian POWs in America fared even better, with some working on American farms, living in barracks with heating and electricity, and eating food comparable to American military rations. Many maintained friendships with American guards and civilians that lasted decades after the war. This wasn't simply altruism, it was strategic. General Marshall understood that treating enemy prisoners well encouraged others to surrender, thereby reducing American casualties. It also laid crucial groundwork for post-war reconstruction. "We must win not just the war but the peace that follows," Marshall wrote in 1944. How we treat defeated enemies will determine whether they become future friends or future threats. The repatriation program that eventually brought Yokoi home was an integral part of this strategy. Between 1945 and 1948, the U.S. processed hundreds of thousands of Japanese POWs, returning them to their families with medical care, clean clothing, and often supplemental food rations. In June 1947, after 3 months of recovery, Shoichi Yokoi boarded a transport ship bound for Japan. Patterson and several other Marines came to see him off. "Remember what you saw here," Patterson said through Nakamura. "Tell your people. Americans and Japanese do not have to be enemies." Yokoi bowed deeply, executing the formal bow of profound respect. "I will tell them," he said in halting English. "I will tell them. Americans have honor." Patterson laughed a warm, genuine sound and pulled Yokoi into an American-style hug. "Take care of yourself, buddy. Say hello to your mother for me." The ship journey took 12 days. Yokoi stood at the rail, gazing at the vast Pacific waters, his mind replaying everything that had transpired. He had spent 2 years in a cave expecting death. He had found kindness instead. When the ship docked in Yokohama, Yokoi's mother was waiting. She was smaller than he remembered, aged by 3 years of inconsolable grief. When she saw him, she collapsed. Yokoi caught her, and they wept together on the dock. "I thought you were dead," she sobbed. "I thought I had lost you." "The Americans saved me," Yokoi told her. "I do not understand why, but they saved me." Yokoi struggled to reintegrate into civilian life. Post-war Japan was devastated, cities bombed into rubble, the economy shattered, people starving. But American aid was everywhere: food, shipments, medical supplies, reconstruction materials. General MacArthur's occupation focused on rebuilding, not punishment. Yokoi found work with a construction company helping to rebuild Nagoya. He married in 1950, and they had 2 children. He rarely spoke about the war, but when he did, he always mentioned the Marines who had found him in that cave. "They could have shot me," he told his son years later. "I was their enemy. I had tried to kill Americans, but they gave me chocolate instead of bullets. They gave me kindness instead of hatred. That is strength." In 1975, Yokoi did something remarkable. He wrote to the Marine Corps asking if anyone could help him find Patterson. He wanted to thank him properly. The Marines found Patterson, now a restaurant owner in Sacramento, California, exactly as he had planned. The 2 men exchanged letters. Patterson invited Yokoi to visit California in 1977. At age 61, Yokoi flew to America, his first return since leaving Guam 30 years earlier. Patterson picked him up at the airport, and the 2 old men embraced like long-lost brothers. "I never forgot you," Yokoi said in careful English. "I never forgot you either," Patterson replied. They spent a week together. Patterson showed Yokoi his restaurant, his family, his life. Yokoi met Patterson's wife and his 3 daughters. They ate dinner together, drank whiskey, and looked at old photographs. "You changed my life," Yokoi told Patterson on their last night. "You showed me that enemies can become friends, that mercy is stronger than revenge." Patterson shrugged. "I just treated you like a person. That is all." "That is everything," Yokoi said. Yokoi's story represents a larger truth about American post-war policy. The decision to treat defeated enemies with dignity yielded extraordinary strategic dividends. The Marshall Plan, which meticulously rebuilt Western Europe, transformed former adversaries into America's closest allies. Germany, once bombed into rubble, became a cornerstone of NATO. Japan, similarly devastated, evolved into America's most important Asian ally. This outcome was not inevitable. After World War I, harsh treatment of Germany contributed to a deep-seated resentment that ultimately fueled the rise of Nazism. After World War II, America consciously chose a different path. MacArthur's occupation of Japan focused squarely on democratization and reconstruction, not revenge. Japanese war criminals were indeed prosecuted, but the Japanese people themselves were treated as partners in rebuilding, not as conquered subjects. This approach fostered a generation of Japanese people who remembered American kindness. Yokoi was just one of millions who came to see Americans not as the demons of wartime propaganda, but as principled individuals. When the Cold War began, Japan sided with America, as did Germany, Italy, and other former Axis powers. The deliberate decision to win the peace through decency, not domination, forged alliances that have endured for 70 years. In a 1995 interview, 79-year-old Yokoi reflected profoundly on his experience. "I spent 2 years in a cave eating insects, terrified of American demons. I was a fool. The demons were in my own mind, planted by propaganda. The Americans I met were just men trying to do their jobs honorably. They taught me that enemies are made by politics, but humanity transcends politics." He continued, "When Patterson gave me his jacket, when Doc Williams treated my wounds, when Lieutenant Chen, whose people we had brutalized, showed me kindness, they were doing something more powerful than defeating me in battle. They were showing me that my government had lied to me. That honor is not about dying for abstract causes. It is about treating others with dignity even when you do not have to." Yokoi's children remember their father as a man utterly transformed by his encounter with American values. "He taught us that strength is not about hatred," his daughter said. "It is about being strong enough to show mercy, even to your enemies." He learned that from the Marines who found him in that cave. When Yokoi died in 1997, at age 81, his family discovered dozens of letters from Patterson Christmas cards spanning 30 years. Patterson had never forgotten the terrified soldier he had found in that jungle cave. At Yokoi's funeral, his family read Patterson's final letter. "Shoichi, you once thanked me for treating you like a human being, but I should thank you. You reminded me why we fought that war, not to destroy enemies, but to prove that decency and honor matter, even in the darkest times. You are my friend, buddy. Always will be." Shoichi Yokoi's story isn't merely about American military superiority or technological advantage. It is about something far more fundamental, the immense power of treating enemies with humanity. When Patterson wrapped his jacket around Yokoi's shoulders, he wasn't simply following a manual. He was acting on deeply held American values, the profound belief that all people possess inherent dignity, that mercy is strength, not weakness, and that how you treat defeated enemies reveals your true character. This principle, repeated thousands of times across Europe and the Pacific, transformed enemies into allies. It is why Germany and Japan, nations that fought America with everything they had, became America's closest partners within a generation. The lesson is stark. Hatred is easy, revenge is easy, but treating your enemy like a human being when you have every conceivable reason not to, that is hard. That demands moral courage. Yokoi expected torture because that is what propaganda told him to expect. Patterson offered him chocolate instead. That single act of kindness began dissolving years of lies. Multiply that by thousands of similar encounters, and you begin to understand how America won the peace even faster than it won the war. This story matters immensely today because the temptation toward dehumanization never truly disappears. Every conflict inevitably produces propaganda that paints enemies as monsters. Every war creates countless opportunities for revenge. But Yokoi's story reminds us that seeing past propaganda, consciously choosing mercy over revenge, and treating defeated enemies with dignity is not naive idealism. It is, in fact, strategic wisdom. The Marines who found Yokoi could have killed him. Some might even argue he deserved it. Instead, they gave him water, chocolate, medical care, and a path home to his mother. That profound choice created a man who spent 50 years telling people that Americans have honor. It forged a friendship that lasted decades. It represented principles that turned former enemies into allies. When we face conflicts today, Yokoi's story asks us, will we choose the path of dehumanization and revenge, or the harder path of seeing our enemies as human beings caught in circumstances beyond their control? The answer truly matters. It always has. In March 1947, Private First Class Shoichi Yokoi crouched in a bamboo cave gripping a rusty bayonet, fully prepared to die at the hands of American demons. Instead, he found humanity. He found Marines who wrapped him in warm jackets, fed him chocolate, and treated him with a dignity he had never shown his own prisoners. He found nurses who diligently healed his wounds, interpreters who patiently helped him write to his mother, and officers who shook his hand with profound respect. He found Americans who chose mercy over revenge, who steadfastly followed their principles even when it was incredibly difficult, who understood that how you treat your enemies ultimately reveals who you are. Shoichi Yokoi expected death. He found friendship instead. This was not merely American military doctrine. This was American character, and it changed everything.